So I think this post might be a little longer, but it's my area of expertise. So let me explain. He put out an executive order around our 401ks, and I'd like to give some back history as well as what this means to us. So he wants to debank our 401ks, meaning that other people can manage our 401ks, but he also wants to open it to alternative investments. So let's do the history now. So in the early 2000s, Enron and Tyco were the two big players that caused a law called Sarbanes-Oxley, or we refer to it as SOX. Europe did one similar. It was called EU8. It's under the ENISA regulatory authorities. So what they did, Tyco and Enron, was they invested all of their employees' money in stocks for their own company. And when they were found to be doing fraudulent activity and the company eventually went bankrupt, those people lost their entire life savings overnight, many of them really close to retirement. So Sarbanes-Oxley was passed as a regulatory law to change the environment so that you had to have something called an internal control system. Now, an internal control system is a set of controls that look at every transaction or a sampling of transactions to try to identify fraud. What Enron had done was they were putting through transactions under 5,000 because those wouldn't flag banks. And they were not necessarily on the level. They were recording things that were not true, therefore fraudulent. And it was found, and then the company went belly up. But that's the history of why Sarbanes-Oxley was passed, and that was a regulatory law. It's a very long law, so I won't go into much more detail than that. But basically now all companies have to have a set of controls to prove you're not cooking the books. And I do this every day, but I do it for risk and IT areas. So now, back to the EO. He wants to debank, meaning other people can control your portfolio. He wants to open it to alternative investments. So historically, our 401ks are stock bond funds. So they are managed by banks, and they have very detailed people that know what they're doing. They try to keep their risk rather low. There's regulations around that. But now he wants to open it up to private equity, cryptocurrency, and real estate. And as we know, triggers can impact that. And all of a sudden, you could have your 401k wiped out pretty quickly based upon anything that would occur in that space. There's not a lot of regulations that those particular areas have to comply with. However, they can bring about high returns, but they can also bring about high losses. Now, there is losses, in the stock market based upon current economic situations, but those fluctuations usually go up and down quite readily, and the long-term impact is pretty low. But if you're in like real estate, cryptocurrency, or private equity companies, which are not publicly traded, you could have bigger, higher risks, because a lot of those don't have to be compliant with the rules and regulations that SOX was put in place to fix. So, again, he doesn't explain exactly how they're going to roll it out. None of his EOs do. But I see that to be a situation where fools will be easily parted with our money. Just my opinion. Take it for what it is.